Hello and welcome to part two of the five-part presentation on the interwar period, that time period between World War I and World War II. These are notes 13.1b, and this is of course Mr. Marks. Following the war, the nations of the world are going to try to decide to not ever have a war like that again. Woodrow Wilson had put this forth in his 14 points that no power should try to take the land which belonged to another nation through military means. And this is going to lead to the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. Signing it at that point in time is actually Calvin Coolidge, the American president. This was an agreement not to use war as any kind of national policy. Ironically, it will be just over a decade, and nearly every single one of the countries that are represented by those leaders standing there are going to end up in war, specifically World War II. And a large reason for this was because the pact itself and the League of Nations were powerless to enforce their policies. The League of Nations, if you remember, was created to make a place where people could air out their differences before they went to war, where nations could air out their differences. And this Kellogg-Briand Pact says that they're not going to go to war. The problem is that there was no answer to the question, what if somebody decides to go to war? There was not a good answer to it. It was all based on the faith that everyone was just going to get along. During this time period, European was also finding itself in a phase of disarmament. This was happening all over Europe, but no place more dramatically than in Germany itself. Disarmament is the reduction of armed forces and weapons. Not all countries are going to stick to this policy, even though that's what the Kellogg-Briand Pact was asking for. In many cases, it only tended to weaken those countries who didn't want war. And that would make them much easier to be taken over later on. Those that wanted war simply didn't disarm. Germany, however, if you remember, due to the Treaty of Versailles, was forced into this. And there was a section along the Rhineland, this border between France and Germany, well actually Germany and France, Luxembourg, Belgium and the Netherlands, where the Germans were not allowed to have any kind of military troops at all. It was literally taken from them. This is one of the key points of resentment and one of those areas where Hitler is going to say, how dare other countries tell us what we can or cannot do in our own land? How dare they tell us that we cannot defend ourselves by having troops on our own borders? He actually means it the other way around. He wants to use his troops to take over the world, but that's basically the idea. The French also weren't satisfied with this idea of Germany just giving up its army. So they also developed something called the Maginot Line. Great Britain wanted to release some of the restrictions that were set up in the Treaty of Versailles. And if you remember, the United States even refused to sign the treaty. But France was the one where all of the war had taken place, and they never wanted anything like it again. They felt the only way to do this, the only way to keep them from having no man's lands left all over their country, hills which were several meters shorter, and millions of their young men killed off, an entire generation of young men killed off. They felt the only way to stop this was to first of all make sure Germany did not have the means to ever create an army like that again, and secondly, to build the heaviest possible fortifications along that line, along their borders. They'll do the strongest fortifications right on the border with Germany, and they'll do lighter fortifications along Belgium and Luxembourg, just on the offhand chance that Germany is going to try to go through them once again. These are going to have heavy fortifications. The strongest part of the Maginot Line, that border between France and Germany, is going to have artillery, which is facing towards Germany and will be cemented in so it can't be stolen or overrun. It'll include an extensive tunnel system, including electrical and phone lines and rail lines that connect all of these different bunkers. France had created the most modern defensive system that the world had ever seen, and it was confident that it would hold up against any German attack. Um, and in a sense, they were correct. The Germans are just going to end up going around them once it comes to World War II. Now, not everything was going grand for Great Britain either. They were dealing especially with an independence movement in Ireland. You see, after World War I, the IRA, which stands for the Irish Republican Army, fought for the independence of Ireland. Ireland is a separate island, it's a separate kingdom. They have a different language. The Irish are primarily Catholic, while the British are Protestant. We're trying to force that religion on them for as long as they'd been in control of Ireland. And the IRA wanted independence. In 1922, Britain is going to give independence to Ireland, which is largely Catholic. However, the northernmost part of Ireland, which is largely Protestant, is going to remain under British control. To deal with this, the IRA will continue fighting in order to ensure that Ireland could become a united force again. By the way, the green, white, and orange, if you did not already know, is the Irish flag. This independence movement is, well, to this day, Ireland is not actually unified. The people of Northern Ireland and the people of Southern Ireland have come to a more peaceful agreement, and only recently. But there's still a lot of resentment about this division that the British caused. Meanwhile, the British is going to form a Commonwealth of Nations in 1931. It realizes after World War I that it cannot maintain all of the colonies that it had before, and many of them had actually pushed for independence. In 1931, Great Britain is going to give independence to 4 of its former colonies, 4 of its kind of most important former colonies. They're going to remain a part of the Commonwealth that has actually no political power, but they're going to share an agreement on the rights of citizens, kind of like the United States' Bill of Rights, but Britain's right of citizens. They're going to have economic and cultural ties between these countries, and they're going to hold the British monarchy as the common head of their countries, though the British head, king or queen, has no actual political power. Political power. These 4 original colonies are Australia and New Zealand, top flag, bottom flag on the left, Canada, upper right, and South Africa, bottom right. By 2009, the Commonwealth will end up including 59 total nations.